F-16C is here, and it's not a plane I was expecting to show up this year, and it's also weird that we skipped to the Block 50 and the F-16D Block 40 instead of just getting a single seat Block 30 for both trees, but it is what it is. After the update released, I played most of my matches in the SMT first to cover it and get a feel for that plane, and as I talked about in my review of it, the SMT just isn't the plane for me. The weapons are outstanding, but the flight model isn't quite there. Going from the SMT to the new F-16s was such a breath of fresh air for me, and for reasons I'll get into, I just can't stop playing these new Vipers. So, first of all, in terms of airframe, our F-16C has a new GE engine, which is more powerful than the Pratt & Whitney offering you're used to in the F-16A. However, the F-16C weighs more, so the thrust to weight ends up being about the same, and in terms of general flight performance, it's very similar to the ADF and MLU, maybe slightly worse. Keep in mind all F-16As themselves got a buff, which is to say the F-16C feels great. Its flight performance across the board is really good, it feels nice to fly, it's a very competitive airframe. The only planes that beat it in a straight up fight are F-16As, especially the Block 10s like the AJ and Nets, but the odds of you getting into a fight with one of these on even conditions with an equally skilled pilot are slim to none, and the outcome of most of your fights with other F-16s is going to be based more on situation, weight, and pilot skill. So the F-16C flight model might not be the best in the game, but it's up there with the best for sure. Then for your weapons, you get the new AIM-9Ms. I'm gonna be completely honest, I've dropped the Sparrows entirely and never looked back. These new Sidewinders are a ton of fun to use. In case you didn't know, they're the only missiles in ARB at this point with tracking suspension IRCCM, so the way you flare them is entirely different from the way you're used to flaring every other IR missile up to this point. In a nutshell, they are weaker from front and rear aspect, are very strong from side aspect, and require constant use of flares combined with changes in direction to successfully decoy. A large chunk of the player base has not figured this out, so I've been able to get a feel for 9Ms and I'm starting to have an idea of when I can launch these things and expect them to connect based on how I expect the average player to try to flare them. On top of the fancy IRCCM, they're smokeless, which I'm not sure if it makes such a big difference for the guy on the receiving end of the missile, but it's actually kind of annoying for you when you launch them because sometimes you think they're not going to get there, and then as soon as you fire a second missile, the first one connects, which is just a lack of experience issue on my part more than anything, and I'm completely nitpicking here. I'm not denying that the R-73 is the better missile overall, especially if you can launch it at closer ranges where the more traditional Seeker is basically impossible to flare sometimes, but the 9M Seeker feels stronger in certain scenarios to me, especially from side aspect at longer ranges where I'm starting to trust these missiles a little bit more and I'm seeing some really good results. But that will probably change as the player base gets smarter and adapts and learns to flare the 9M like they did when it came to learning to fly low to defeat SAR missiles. As for the Barak 2, the Barak 2 is marginally heavier, but not by much, but it has a worse engine than the F-16C, so in terms of flight performance, it is solidly the worst F-16, but not by a huge margin, and I never felt like my airframe was a big limitation when I was playing it. In exchange for that, you do get more flares. The F-16D has 200 compared to the F-16C's 120. Having 200 flares meant I was able to use them more generously, which is very nice with all these IRCCM missiles getting thrown around in 16v16. But ultimately, the F-16C has 120, which was enough for me. I didn't once run out even when using chaff. These new F-16s don't have a ridiculous amount of flares like the F-14B or Harrier GR7, but 120 is absolutely enough, and with 200 you can really lean into your countermeasure button against the 9M, and like I said, constant flaring is something the 9M really doesn't like. If you're in the situation where you can choose which one to get, go for the Block 50. If you just have Israel, you're still getting a super competitive and fun jet. I played about an equal number of matches in both of them. I had a great time in both of them. You could give me either one and I'd be happy, but the Block 50 is the better plane, so that's the one I'll stick with. And that's not to mention CAS. I don't play CAS, but the Block 50 is apparently kind of broken with its smokeless 9Ms and its smokeless AGM-65Ds coupled with the targeting pod. Keep in mind the Barak doesn't have Mavericks, so that's another area where it falls behind. So the new F-16s, they might not necessarily be the best jets in the game at anything, but they're really darn good at just about everything, and for me personally, they are the most fun jets in the game at the moment. I don't think they should have been added. We didn't need more major nation power creep, but the next update is only a month away, so we're not going to have to wait long to get our next installment of major nation power creep. I'm probably going to do another video on RWRs soon, so subscribe to not miss that, come hang out on Discord, and thanks for watching.